EDAS 116, Who Am I? Communication Time Flux. During this course, I've had many opportunities to reflect on who I am as a communicator, how I communicate with people within my life. I took the perspective that time is a major factor in communication. It takes time to understand the people I'm communicating with. It takes time for me to heal from relationship and communication issues of the past. Just as it takes time for me to become a better communicator. This is why my first image is a TARDIS. The TARDIS represents how communication changes throughout time and how reflecting on the past can help growth in the future. I believe that this aligns with the course design itself, as we not only began with self reflection, but interwove it throughout the weeks. As an old fan of Doctor Who, this is an image I directly relate to how the course was made. I also related to it to how I think. My mind sometimes feels everywhere at once. In the past, future, present. In my poster, I have two images that reflect how my ADHD diagnosis affects my communication abilities and how I have had to learn to adapt in life. The first I will discuss is the graphic showing steam coming out of a person's ears. I thought of this when Julian Treasure discussed the mixer technique for developing better listening. For me, I am constantly doing the mixer. How I feel I can hear everything around me, every noise, to me is way higher degrees than other people may be hearing it. At least that's how it feels to me. It is a struggle handling these noises, and I have had to communicate with loved ones about limiting them around me. This is an aspect of listening for me. My hearing is really sensitive and I can't filter out different sounds. The other picture that references ADHD is the Homer Simpson meme, which reads, "When my ADHD gives me a hard time remembering what someone just said to me. Can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said about doing things?" This represents how, with ADHD, it can be a struggle to follow along in conversations and retain what others are saying. Over time, I have improved in mindfully listening to people in most situations, as long as the conversation does not become too long winded. Like, very short and blunt works best with me. It's rough. With my loved ones, I have been able to discuss with them why and how this is important for me, which is an important part of my communication journey. Many of the pictures in my collage represent different steps in my communication journey throughout my life. These pictures are in the four corners of the poster. In the top left, I have a family photo. I am the very smiley toddler in my father's arms. I believe it is important to acknowledge my family in my communication journey. Not only did I learn to communicate through them, as humans learn through socialization, but my parents in particular did their best to raise me knowing my needs as an ADHD person and what tools I would need as an adult. Unfortunately, in the late 80s, 90s, ADHD was seen more as a burden than anything else, so it was definitely harder then than it is now when people have so many supports that can help them out. Though we have always had our issues with communicating, as I discussed in my later post, with time there has always come healing, and as we all have grown and learned how to better communicate with one another. The second corner is a reference to my post about my friend's suicide, and how through reflection I realized that I avoided the issue for a long time while trying to cope with it. Thinking of this occurrence in my life brings up mixed emotions, but helps me to see where there was growth in the communication between me and a trusted adult. This experience helped me to grow in my ability to show empathy towards people who are struggling with loss and similar debilitative emotions. Debilitative. In the next corner, I put a graphic that represents a manager. I was a manager for many years, and during this period of my life, I developed personally and professionally as a communicator. I had to direct employees that were mostly younger than me to develop my ability to speak on a professional level to district personnel. I believe I thrived in this setting, as my bold communicating style and listening style enabled me in leadership roles. By giving ideas, I was able to enact positive change in my workplace and develop confidence in my ability to be in a leadership role. I look forward to applying and further developing these skills in my future career as an educational assistant. The last corner has two images. One is a picture of mine and my wife's wedding rings, which were passed down from my parents, so I didn't even have to spend money on them. Woohoo! This photo represents how marriage has posed new challenges. Oh, so many challenges. But it's good. Along with the average struggle of understanding differences, my wife and I have very, very different communication and listening styles. One listens, the other doesn't. Sorry, she gets me. She would have laughed, so it's okay that I said that. Learning about different aspects of communication in this course, such as listening styles, communication in conflict, and non-violent communication, has given a label to different issues that exist in our relationship. Fitting with the theme of my poster is the fact that marriage is an ongoing process of growing in the ability to communicate and listen to one another over time. Beside the rings is an apple. Honeycrisp apples are my favorite. A common symbol for education, sorry. Throughout my schooling for the field of education, I have been growing more in my professional ability to communicate and have been communicating with different people. I also need to consider how, as a professional educational assistant, I will use communication in the school, whether in the classroom, in the hallways, during staff meetings, or even during my interview. Understanding how body language affects our communication is helpful in these areas. I also felt Julian Treasure's I also felt how Julian Treasure's RASA, receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask, would be useful in the workplace as well as in my personal life. Listening and communicating is a big part of what education is, and being able to do it in a way that is positive is an essential skill for my future. Sorry, just realized the light's not the greatest, so I don't have anywhere awesome to set up. A very small house. I've discussed some of the middle images already, but I will continue with those. These images illustrate parts of my own identity as a communicator. I added a picture of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse to represent how this concept was an intriguing insight into how communication plays out in conflict. The concept was applicable to how conflict plays out in reality, so having an understanding of what needs to be fixed in these times is important in my growth as a communicator. You can tell by the picture that I am a bona fide Marvel fan. Spider-Man is the best, though. Speaking of Marvel, you may have noticed I have a picture of the Hulk as well. I chose this because I tend to shout, not something that's one of my better attributes. When I get escalated, I raise my voice, and at times it is hard for me to control. I believe it is a mixture of my personality and potentially my ADHD, although I'm not trying to pass blame onto ADHD. It's my choice, and I need to work on it even more. Although it's part of the regulating emotions is sometimes tricky when there is conflict. As a communicator, I believe it is important to acknowledge where I struggle and I work to improve. Even when I'm just playing video games with my little nephews who are young, if there's a situation that's frustrating, I yell. They know that I'm not mad or angry. I just yell. It's how my voice naturally just gets escalated. And I know I sound angry, but I'm not half the time. It's just, I can't control that. And it's been 30 years of trying, but always working on it. During this class, I came to the conclusion that I am a critical listener. Critical listeners decipher meanings and communications that are not spoken outwardly and tend not to accept things at face value. I believe this result was very characteristic of me. Not only am I unafraid to respond to something with a rebuttal or a debating statement, but I enjoy debating about topics. I am not offended by disagreement, and as long as it is supported by evidence, I am willing to accept the flaws others may see in my own logic. When I think of these fractures in statements made by others, I may communicate my ideas in order to help that person see why their logic is flawed. I notice that some people take it better than others. Now that I have learned about different types of listeners, I can attribute this to the fact that some types are better than others at accepting outside perspectives and considering them. My critical listener tendencies relate to the picture of Spock I added to my poster. I believe in thinking logically about things and try to keep emotion out of it, and believe it is more important to think and problem solve with the head first rather than the heart. I can see how this may relate to the horseman that I tend to fall into during conflict, criticism. But it is also an important part of positive qualities as well. Being blunt in communication was encouraged in my family and is integral to how I interact with people. It enables me to ask questions and speak honestly. It is also how I am able to learn and grow. On a side note, something interesting I noticed while choosing the photo is how the Star Trek creators manipulated the peace sign to make the Vulcan live long and prosper signal, which is a nonverbal communicator. This was a fun and interesting connection to read about when we excuse me, my mouth will not stop getting dry. Cold weather and way too much time with the heater on. This was a fun and interesting connection to when we read about how there are sometimes different nonverbal signals in different cultures. To close the presentation, I would like to take a moment to highlight how I presented the analysis. Though the topics were connected, the presentation may have felt a little chaotic at times, as if I was jumping around the poster while describing. This was designed intentionally to show that communication is not linear. Communication is like time warp, blasting us backwards, forwards, growing, but always in need of more growth. As we grow older, we learn more and more about how to communicate positively with others in the world around us. Hence the communication time flux. Thank you for listening, and sorry for the lighting once again. It's literally the best I can do. Even got Christmas lights on to try to help it out. Alright, well, thank you and Merry Christmas.